So, look who it is, guys. DataDash. We're looking here. We got Nicholas.
Oh, it's a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah. So, of course, I've been watching your content. I like some of your macro perspectives. Great presentation today.
Thank you.
You were great as the master of the mic there. But now we're here at the Neo Devcon here in Seattle. Tell me what brings you to the event, why you're here, and tell us a little bit about what you do in the industry.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Nicholas Merton. I run a YouTube channel known as DataDash, cover mostly cryptocurrencies, but a broad range of different markets, equities, and commodities as well. So really a macro trader, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, macro perspectives for sure.
Yeah, it's important to get a view of what's going on in a multitude of spaces. Now, towards the question about Neo, I came out this way because I've been wanting to come to a developer conference for some time. I've been going to a ton of crypto conferences, but it's usually not the kind of vibe that I want us looking for in this case. And even in the bear market, you find really the inspiration is here, behind these doors, and meeting people who are actually building up real applications. And I think Alex and I were talking a little bit earlier, what we've found is just how much is going on right now, how much investment and also development. One thing that really shocked me is I met the team at O3, who's developing one of the Neo wallets. And it was so fascinating from a year ago when I was starting to look at DEXs and just how complicated it was to actually interact with them, and you had to do them through a computer. Now within these Neo wallets, you can interact instantly, and there's real applications.
Integrated into the existing wallets. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's totally different. So it's starting to look like we're at that cusp of hitting really what will be our .com bubble on the investment side of crypto, because we've only got about a little less than 1% adoption. And what happens when we
get 2?
Yeah, when we get 2.
What happens to 2% adoption? Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so interesting. You're seeing people like Fidelity again. JP Morgan just released his new shitcoin. Shitcoin. So we see a lot of the institutional interest. Of course, this year has been really hard on a lot of the projects. This sustained bear market, we'll call it. Spencer and myself have been really lucky because we do services in the blockchain. And we provide a lot of hardware to produce cryptocurrency.
Absolutely.
You as well, you've stayed mostly on the trading sides of things this year and the content creation. So I assume that you've been having a net profitable year as well. Are you down or are you up?
In the sense of some investments, generally down. But it's mostly, those are long-term investments that I've held. I don't put everything long-term. As I mentioned on my channel previously, I got out of a lot of altcoin positions because I could spot the rally in December coming to a peak, Q4 was coming to a close. But the biggest thing I haven't been doing is, outside of that, I've been expanding the YouTube channel. I've been working on Project Genesis. This is basically a nonprofit venture I'm working towards. It's been self-funded so far. And it's trying to bring bring to life about 2 or 3 major technologies or ideas that I think would help progress adoption and mainstream use of blockchain technology.
Well, I know you can't talk a lot about that, so we're going to buzz you a little more probably next month if possible. But so tell me, this year, okay, is there going to be a catalyst for the bull run? And if so, what could those be?
Right. So I think a short burst kind of catalyst, if we were looking for that, would probably be not so much an ETF. I don't think we're going to be getting that until either, I think it's more likely sometime in 2020. I think people are getting to realize that things are going to take a little bit longer than expected. Biggest reason is that right now you still have the same price manipulation going on in crypto. A lot of exchanges are doing wash trading, things that really shut off the SEC, I think, to even approving something like it. Now, if you can get a better model, for example, I know a lot of people have talked about hybrid ETFs where you have Bitcoin diluted with another asset. Other mechanisms, for example, the Bitcoin futures hit a circuit breaker on the exchanges and only can see so much volatility. I'm curious if something like that, some kind of creative combination, would then make an ETF more viable. Outside of that, though, there's not too many catalysts I can see. I think this is going to be a slower grind.
I think so.
It's going to be more towards real long-term growth and getting us again to, I think, the equivalent adoption rate of 6 or 7% global cryptocurrency use, like the internet during 2000.
I smell the wave. It's coming. I see the floors raising again. I see the project continuing to put out good content. Everyone's coming into beta or coming out of beta. All the mainnets are launching this year for so many of these projects we've been following. So the difficulty, I think, though, from my perspective, is a lot of these funds and projects were funded through ICOs. The difficulty is they held on to coins like Ethereum and Bitcoin throughout the bear market. Now, most people were pretty confident that bear market was going to come to an end in December and early January based on the historical cycles we see in the markets. And you and I, both as macro guys, I imagine we were both putting a little money on the December run as well. I was holding my breath. I was hoping for late January. And we did see everything hit 4,000 again in January. We saw Ethereum get over 150 again, but it didn't last.
Yep.
It didn't last. And probably I would think about 80% of the existing projects are going under right now.
Yep.
Steemit just fired 75% of its staff. A couple more projects are closing the doors. What do you think is the mistake that all these guys are doing? If you could go back to the beginning of 2017,
Yep.
or at 2018, let's say,
Absolutely.
what would you tell these firms and these companies to do differently with their ICOs?
Not spend money so recklessly. I've never seen startups be able to raise, $20-30 million and act humble and say, yeah, we asked for the lower band of, on our raise, and then to run away with money so easily. I mean, I saw it.
Aside from the exit scams and things of this nature.
Yes.
Okay, so with the legitimate projects that are now in serious financial dire straits.
Yeah, I think they need to learn. What I liked about Neo, actually, and you learn from the conference, is they have an approach that's very common in the startup world for successful startups, and that's do something and provide value of some sort, and then you get paid. And I know a lot of people who work for City of Zion, a lot of the developers, sadly didn't get to make it here, that work with Project Genesis, and that's what they do on a daily basis. They do awesome, stellar work, and they get the proper value for it. So you can, for example, use your funds effectively and get stuff done, and be under budget in a sense, but still get very good value out of it.
Yeah, the tokenization is very interesting. One of the projects with Neo, of course, and one of the projects we look at, Skycoin.
Yep.
They essentially tokenized 100% of their coins, pre-mined. Now, normally we don't like this model, but if they're using this to drive development and education, I think it is a model that works. We've seen it work. Neo continues to develop. They continue to pay out developers and reward people for working on the system. And it's kept a large team of core people involved throughout the bear market.
You're absolutely right.
Whereas we see a lot of other projects, they just, Spencer and I were laughing at the last conference we saw. One of the talks, the guys had all moved on to other things.
Mm-hmm.
But 6 months ago when they signed up for the talk, it was the hot topic at that point. None of them were working on it anymore.
Yep.
We're seeing a lot of this with the development community. So you think that building out value and paying the developers, this is probably one of the better models?
Yeah, well, I'd say one thing as well, you kind of hinted to, and I would love to get your opinion on it as well, Alex. I think that for a lot of these ICOs that came out to not have further treasury models or an established foundation of some sort.
Yes, absolutely. Now, you said something really good about that, which I'd liked, which I hadn't come to this conclusion myself. But so what I had suggested is obviously turn it to fiat.
Yep.
Take out the necessary funds month over month, look at your overhead, and take these things out. We work with farms at scale, we work with companies and developing groups, and we tell them, cover your overhead, pay your power, pay your employees. As long as you can account for that, then there is no real downside. Right?
Absolutely.
At the end, all you end up with is a project.
Yep.
Right.
There's the big issue you're referring to is the fact that a lot of ICOs basically raised a ton of ETH, and the ICO model itself is already iffy at this point. It's very new, but again, we're at that space
and
where
heavily unregulated.
Yeah,
heavily manipulated.
Yes, heavily manipulated as well, and a lot of them obviously didn't turn out anything. But the biggest issue with the ICO model that I always saw was the fact that you're raising an Ether, which a lot of people saw as a benefit at first, because during the bull market, Ethereum was rising. So if a project was, let's say, for example, early stage ICO in early 2017. They raise 5 million, turns into 10 million, turns into 15,
yep.
20.
Yep.
And if you were one of the lucky projects that raised early, you could have not only survived a lot of this, the bull market and spent lavishly with the ETH you raised, but also in the bear market, you could survive for a while because you had that surplus. A lot of ICOs raised later, and they didn't have the luxury.
January, February, March.
Yes, and they didn't do what every ICO should have done, which is take that Ethereum you raised, or the Bitcoin, or whatever you cryptocurrency you raised, and take it to OTC, because there was investors at the time buying
This is
them.
really interesting. So you had suggested that you get investors to basically offload that cryptocurrency into fiat, and then they maintain support of the project that way.
Precisely.
Very interesting. This would have been bulletproof for at least a dozen projects I can think of. And there would have been people happy to essentially flush in that fiat.
Yep, absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Oh, so guys, why aren't you hiring him to run these? This is clearly good macro advice. This is why we're talking the macro perspectives. So you think STO's going to cause much of a bump this year? You think the STO is essentially the digitization of stock market assets, and the way they're getting around a lot of the regulations and legal standards is by, if you were issuing an STO, if I was to buy, say, Apple shares off your STO token, I never am in possession of those Apple shares. So KYC and all of these other things aren't important, right?
So yeah, what you're saying in that model is basically we're trading a synthetic token in a sense that's basically correlated to someone managing an asset.
Right, and this is a great way to skirt a lot of those regulations. But again, it screams to me the old Greek bankers and the IOUs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the old let me borrow a little more than I have let me lend out a little more than we have in the safe.
Yep.
And I think that JP Morgan, I think a lot of these guys have that mentality where they just can print these things at their leisure.
I think in that sense, if you don't have guarantee that there's can be some, if you don't have a guarantee that there's no dilution of tokens, it kills the benefit of STOs. One person brought up something very constructive to me, which was there was an issue with Dole Foods back a little while ago, where basically Dole Foods is a publicly traded company that I think pretty much grows fruit, and very simple, right? Like, not some major tech company or anyone sketchy, but basically it turned out that they had, I think, like 1/3 or 1/4 more shares than they should have on the public market. And a lot of people ended up getting completely burnt because the shares that they owned were worth
hugely diluted.
Yes, massively diluted.
Man.
And basically, the security tokens on a blockchain, if it's secure enough, you can have an absolute finite amount, just like with Bitcoin, and know exactly how much shares that you have, and be completely transparent on a ledger without even having no identity or anything of that sort.
Right.
So that's what I think security tokens could add value in. On the sense of like, democratizing capital, which is I think was the first thing that people got excited about. I don't see it happening until the regulations catch up, unless again you can get around them. But I think with
that just introduces risk, in my opinion.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, far too much risk.
I think that we want to do as much as we can to, in that sense, when you are dealing with securities, crypto is another topic. I think crypto is, as the SEC has shown, they're completely separate from
Absolutely.
it. When you're talking about peer-to-peer currency, which is kind of my passion, but when you're talking about securities, you got to work with the SEC. You have to work with regulators, and I can tell you the general gist is that most of them are willing to talk. They're willing to work across the aisle. Again, they're not all perfect, but the crypto space isn't perfect as well. We've had our mistakes, and I think we can come together and actually build something really good.
So now, as last question for you, I'm going to do it. I know you hate it, okay? But you're one of the people I look to for macro perspectives. So we're going in. We're still in the bear market. The floors are rising. The adoption seems to be on the up again, and the big business is moving in. What are your predictions for trading in 2019? Are you liquidating? Are you holding your favorite projects? Are you trading week to week? What is your method to madness to stay in the green throughout this relentless bear market?
Well, I think that's where it benefits to be a macro trader. Right now, a very uncomfortable truth that I think a lot of people have to face is that we're in a bottoming process. Luckily, that means the good news is that we've gone through the vast majority of the sell side. It's very close to historical indicators we've seen on Bitcoin. If you look at even mainstream technical indicators, the RSI, if you go through, for example, the moving averages on the monthly and weekly, you can see we're going to the same levels we've seen tested before. It's just a matter of taking a few months to bottom, and then, as you mentioned, starting to see some catalysts and starting to see that the trend's coming back, and seeing more further adoption and excitement. For now, the best thing to do is, I think, to look elsewhere. If you're an active trader, to see where other market cycles are happening. I think commodities are good as well. Precious metals, they usually. I've been bearish on gold and silver for quite some time.
I bought a whole ton of silver when Trump was taking office, because I thought everyone was going to retreat out of the real estate markets back into the precious metals, and all of a sudden he propped that stock market up like nobody expected, and everything stayed high. And so I'm down on silver right now.
Yeah.
But you're saying that right now is probably a good time to move your assets into the precious metals.
Absolutely, and I would even go further back to I know a lot of people, for example, who bought into silver and gold during the peak of commodities in 2011. Of course, obviously from the fears of 2008. And the problem that I see is that I use this as an indicator. It's not something I enjoy, but when I see the vast majority of people who had picked the top previously starting to sell on the bottom and saying, I can't handle this anymore, equities are rallying, we're just finally starting to see the signs that this is time to get in.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to recommend anything, of course, but the reason why I hold that perspective is because you've got equities finally selling off. The U.S. is finally catching up to foreign markets that have been selling off for quite some time. You've got, along with that as well, a lot of geopolitical factors, as you mentioned as well. You've got trade tensions, but more than anything, I think it's the central bank monetary policy, which is what everyone wants to focus on. And when even the Fed is struggling to taper off, just its balance sheet that it said was going to keep on autopilot. I mean, the signs are showing in, the clock's ticking, and it's just a matter of the moment. If they continue down that route of reducing monetary policy or getting more hawkish on monetary policy and raising rates, I think it's a win-win for commodities in that case. And I could easily see silver going up back to $50 and beyond. I could see gold going past 2,000 an ounce. But it's not something I think you're going to see this year, probably into 2020, 2021.
I'll leave it with this. I see that gold-backed currency is coming strong too.
Yeah,
I
there's
see
a few
that
here
there's,
at Neo.
yeah. So I see that there's going to be. You might even start seeing government dollars go back to gold-backed with all the inflation and things that are happening in certain parts of the world. I would not be surprised if you see several countries in the next 2 years go back to precious metal-based currency.
Yeah.
And what will that do to the American dollar? What will that do to the Canadian dollar? What will that do? It's lots of interesting stuff. So if people want to check out more of your perspectives and hear more of your views on the blockchain, where can they find you?
You can go over to YouTube. If you just simply search DataDash, you'll find me on there. The logo is a green bowl, like with a chart going up in between it. So yeah, if you guys want to check it out, feel free to check that out. And also go to my website, nicholasmerton.com. And if you guys want, we do a newsletter as well. But for the most part, every piece of content I put out is free. You guys can check it out. Trading, macro analysis, all kinds of stuff. And trying to keep up as much as I can in the crypto space, so I'll share everything I can find.
Yeah, no secrets over here. Okay, well, thanks. This is Alex and Nicholas and Spencer behind the camera. Say hi, Spencer.
Yo.
We're just at the Seattle DevCon here and for Neo. And that's all for now, guys. Pay attention to those perspectives. It's going to be a big year.